What kind of person screams at a teenage server over a bowl of noodles? Karen Holloway, that's who. The bell above the diner's door jangled as she stormed in, her heavy footsteps shaking the faded linoleum floor. The air in Rosie's diner, usually thick with the comforting aroma of broth and fresh herbs, turned sour the moment she opened her mouth. Karen's voice, sharp and grating, sliced through the hum of quiet conversation. "This place is a dump. You call this service?" she bellowed, slamming her purse on the counter. The other patrons, two truckers and an elderly woman sipping tea, froze, their forks hovering mid-air. Ellie, the 17-year-old server, barely 5 feet tall with a ponytail fraying from a long shift, stood behind the counter, her hands trembling as she clutched a notepad. Karen's eyes, narrowed to slits, locked onto her like a predator spotting prey. "I ordered spicy beef noodles, not this tasteless slop," she spat, shoving a half-eaten bowl across the counter, broth sloshing onto Ellie's apron. The diner wasn't fancy, just a family-run spot in a dusty Ohio town, but it was a haven for locals who craved Rosie's homemade pho. Karen, though, wasn't local. She was passing through, and she'd made it clear she thought the town and everyone in it was beneath her. Ellie stammered an apology, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I can get you a fresh bowl." "Don't ma'am me." Karen cut her off, her chins wobbling as she leaned closer, her breath hot with indignation. "You think I'm stupid? You think I can't tell you're serving me garbage?" The accusation hung heavy, absurd in its venom. Rosie's was known for its fresh ingredients, sourced from local farms, and the noodles were made daily by Rosie herself, a Vietnamese immigrant who'd built the diner from nothing. Karen's outburst wasn't about the food, it was about power. She thrived on making people squirm, and Ellie, young and inexperienced, was an easy target. The elderly woman at the counter shifted uncomfortably, her eyes darting to the door, while the truckers exchanged a look that said they'd seen this kind of scene before. In the kitchen, Rosie, a wiry woman in her 50s with calloused hands and a no-nonsense stare, overheard the commotion. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out, her presence calming the room like a steady hand on a storm-tossed ship. "What's the problem here?" she asked, her voice firm but polite. Karen wheeled on her, undeterred. "The problem is your incompetent staff and your disgusting food. I want a refund, and I want it now." Rosie's eyes flicked to the bowl, barely touched, the noodles still steaming. She knew Karen's type, someone who'd complain about the sun being too bright if it meant getting something for free. But Rosie wasn't one to back down. "We'll make you a new bowl on the house," she said, her tone measured. "But we don't do refunds for food you've already eaten half of." Karen's face reddened, her voice rising to a screech. "Half? I barely touched it. You're trying to scam me." The lie was so blatant it stung, but Rosie held her ground, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to Karen's histrionics. Ellie, still shaken, retreated to the kitchen to prepare a fresh bowl, her hands fumbling with the ladle. In the back, she whispered to Miguel, the line cook, a lanky 20-something with a quick smile and a knack for keeping things light. "She's gonna make my night hell," Ellie muttered, her voice cracking. Miguel peeked through the kitchen window, watching Karen gesture wildly at Rosie. "She's a piece of work," he said, shaking his head. "But don't worry, kid. We've got your back." There was a glint in his eye, a hint of mischief that Ellie didn't quite catch. As she carried the new bowl out, Karen's tirade continued, now aimed at the diner itself. "This place is a health hazard. I'm calling the inspector tomorrow," she threatened, her voice carrying to the street outside, where a few passers-by slowed to peer through the windows. The elderly woman quietly slipped a $5 bill under her plate and left, unwilling to witness more. Rosie, unfazed, motioned for Ellie to set the bowl down. "Here's your fresh order," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel. Karen snorted, inspecting the bowl like it was evidence in a crime scene. "It better be right this time," she snapped, grabbing a pair of chopsticks. But as she took her first bite, her face twisted in disgust. "This is worse," she shrieked, spitting the noodles back into the bowl. "It's stale. You're serving me garbage on purpose. The accusation was absurd. Rosie's noodles were the pride of the diner, but Karen's voice carried a conviction that made doubt creep into the room. The truckers shifted, one muttering under his breath, "Lady's got issues." Ellie's heart sank. She double-checked the ingredients herself. Something wasn't right. Unbeknownst to Karen, Miguel had been listening from the kitchen, his mind racing. He'd seen customers like her before, bullies who used complaints as weapons. But this time something snapped. He whispered to Ellie, "I might have swapped her noodles." Ellie's eyes widened. "What?" she hissed. Miguel grinned, unrepentant. "Relax. I used the batch from yesterday. Still safe, just not fresh. She wants to complain? Let her taste bad flavor for real." Ellie's stomach churned. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt dangerous. If Karen found out, she'd have ammunition to destroy the diner's reputation. Yet, as Ellie glanced at Rosie, still standing tall against Karen's onslaught, she felt a flicker of defiance. Maybe Karen deserved a taste of her own medicine. The tension in the diner thickened as Karen took another bite, her face contorting further. "This is inedible," she declared, pushing the bowl away. But Rosie didn't flinch. "You said the first bowl was bad, so we made you a new one. You don't like it? That's your choice." Karen's jaw dropped, unused to being challenged. For a moment, the diner was silent, the air crackling with anticipation. Ellie held her breath, torn between guilt and satisfaction. Miguel's prank was a gamble, and they were all in on it now. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for allies, but the truckers avoided her gaze, and the counter was empty save for her untouched bowl. She was alone in her outrage, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Karen's chair scraped against the floor as she stood, her bulk looming over the counter like a storm cloud. Her voice dropped to a venomous hiss, each word deliberate. "You think you can humiliate me? I'm not some nobody you can push around." She pointed a manicured finger at Rosie, who stood unflinching, her arms crossed. The diner felt smaller now, the walls closing in as the confrontation escalated. Ellie, clutching a tray to steady her nerves, felt her pulse race. Miguel's prank had lit a fuse, and Karen was the powder keg. The truckers, now openly watching, leaned forward, their coffee cups forgotten. One whispered to the other, "This lady's about to blow." But Rosie, with years of handling difficult customers, didn't blink. "Nobody's humiliating you," she said evenly. "You got a fresh bowl. If you don't want it, you're free to leave." The words were polite, but the challenge was clear. Karen wasn't in control here. Karen's face twisted, her lips curling into a sneer. "Leave? Oh, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what a scam this place is." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she began typing. Yelp, Google, 11M posting everywhere. "You'll be shut down by next week." The threat landed like a punch. Rosie's diner wasn't just a business. It was her life's work, a testament to her family's resilience after fleeing war-torn Vietnam decades ago. Ellie's eyes darted to Rosie, searching for a crack in her composure. But Rosie's face was a mask of calm. Only her clenched fists betrayed her anger. "Go ahead," Rosie said, her voice low. "Write what you want. Truth speaks louder than lies." But Karen wasn't done. She turned her phone's camera on Ellie, who froze like a deer in headlights. "Smile, sweetheart," Karen mocked, snapping a photo. "This is going viral. Teenage server poisons customer with rotten noodles. How's that for a headline?" Ellie's face burned, her throat tightening. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that she'd done nothing wrong. But the words wouldn't come. Miguel, still in the kitchen, cursed under his breath. His prank, meant as a petty jab, had spiraled into something far worse. He stepped out, wiping his hands on his apron, ready to confess. But Rosie shot him a look that stopped him cold. "Don't," her eyes said. "Not yet." The twist came like a bolt from the blue. The diner's door swung open, and in walked Officer Daniels, a local cop who'd been coming to Rosie's for years. His uniform was slightly rumpled, his face weary from a long shift, but his presence commanded the room. Karen's eyes lit up, sensing an ally. "Officer," she called, her tone shifting to one of exaggerated victimhood. "These people are trying to poison me. Look at this food, it's stale. Disgusting." She thrust the bowl toward him, her voice dripping with false tears. Daniels raised an eyebrow, glancing at Rosie, who gave a subtle shake of her head. He took the bowl, sniffing it cautiously. "Smells like pho to me," he said, his tone neutral. Karen's face faltered, but she doubled down. "It's rancid. I demand you shut this place down." Daniels set the bowl down, his gaze shifting to Karen. "Ma'am, I've eaten here for 10 years. Never had a bad meal. But let's hear your side." Karen launched into a tirade, embellishing every detail: the incompetent staff, the filthy kitchen, the deliberate attempt to make her sick. Ellie's stomach churned. Each word felt like a nail in the diner's coffin. But Daniels listened patiently, his expression unreadable. When Karen finished, he turned to Rosie. "Anything to add?" Rosie's voice was steady, but her words carried weight. "She's been served 2 bowls, both fresh. She didn't like either. That's her right. But she's been threatening my staff and my business since she walked in." Daniels nodded, then turned back to Karen. "You got any proof this food's bad? Receipt? Witnesses?" Karen hesitated, her confidence wavering. The truckers, who'd been silent, spoke up. "Lady's been yelling since she got here," one said. "Food looked fine to me." The other nodded. "She ate half the first bowl before complaining." Karen's face flushed a deeper red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Daniels sighed, rubbing his temple. "Sounds like a misunderstanding. But if you're claiming food poisoning, I'll need to take that bowl for testing. Health department's thorough check everything." Karen froze. Testing the food would reveal the truth. The noodles weren't rancid, just a day old, thanks to Miguel's prank. But admitting that would mean confessing to a lie, and Karen wasn't ready to back down. "I don't have time for this," she snapped, grabbing her purse. "But you'll hear from my lawyer." She stormed toward the door, but Daniels stepped in her path, his voice calm but firm. "Ma'am, if you're making a formal complaint, I'll need your name and contact info. Can't just walk away after accusing someone of a crime." The room went still, the weight of his words sinking in. Karen's bravado cracked, her eyes darting to the exit. For the first time, she looked trapped, her own words a cage she'd built herself. Karen's hand tightened around her purse strap, her knuckles white. The diner's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her face, highlighting the panic flickering in her eyes. Officer Daniels stood firm, his notepad out, pen poised. "Name and address, ma'am," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for evasion. The truckers watched, their earlier amusement replaced by quiet anticipation. Ellie, still behind the counter, felt her heart pound, guilt and fear warring inside her. Miguel's prank had pushed things too far, and now the diner Rosie's lifeblood was at risk. Rosie, though, remained a pillar of calm, her eyes locked on Karen with a mix of pity and resolve. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Karen stammered, her voice losing its edge. "This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here." But Daniels didn't budge. "You accused this establishment of serving unsafe food. That's a serious claim. I need your information, or we can continue this at the station." The word station hit like a thunderclap. Karen's face drained of color, her earlier bluster evaporating. She glanced around, searching for an escape, but the diner's walls offered none. The truckers' gazes were unyielding, and Ellie's wide eyes held a mix of dread and defiance. Karen was cornered, and she knew it. "Fine," she muttered, spitting out her name and a vague address in a neighboring town. Daniels jotted it down, his expression unchanging. "We'll follow up," he said, tucking the notepad away. "And that bowl's coming with me for testing." As Daniels bagged the noodles, Karen's bravado crumbled completely. She slumped back into her chair, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her phone, deleting the half-written review she'd been crafting. The reality of her situation was sinking in. Her lies could be exposed, and the consequences could be more than a bad Yelp review. Rosie stepped forward, her voice soft but piercing. You came into my home and attacked my people. You don't get to walk away like nothing happened. The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of a woman who'd fought harder battles than this. Karen's eyes flicked up, meeting Rosie's, and for a moment, something like shame passed over her face. But it was fleeting, replaced by a scowl as she stood, shoving her chair back. You'll regret this, she hissed, but her voice lacked conviction. She stormed out, the bell above the door jangling violently in her wake. The diner exhaled. The truckers clapped, one letting out a low whistle. Didn't think she'd back down, he said, tipping his hat to Rosie. Ellie, though, wasn't celebrating. She turned to Miguel, her voice a harsh whisper. Why'd you do it? We could have lost everything. Miguel's grin faded, his shoulders slumping. I just wanted her to shut up. I didn't think it'd go this far. Rosie overheard, her eyes narrowing as she joined them. You swapped the noodles? She asked, her voice low. Miguel nodded, shame creeping into his expression. Just the old batch. Nothing dangerous. I'm sorry, Rosie. Rosie's face softened, but her words were firm. You put us all at risk. We don't fight lies with lies. Miguel nodded, his eyes on the floor. Ellie felt a pang of sympathy. Miguel had acted out of loyalty, however misguided. Daniels, finishing his paperwork, looked up. If that food test's fine, she's got no case. But if she pushes, we'll need to be straight about what happened. Rosie nodded, her resolve unshaken. We'll tell the truth. Always do. The words were a lifeline for Ellie, who'd been drowning in guilt. The diner slowly returned to life, the clink of dishes, the hum of the coffee machine, but the weight of the night lingered. Ellie wiped down the counter, her hands steadier now, and Rosie placed a hand on her shoulder. You did good, kid. Held your ground. Ellie managed a small smile, the knot in her chest loosening. Days later, the test results came back. The noodles were safe, just as Rosie knew they would be. Karen's threats fizzled out, her online rants ignored by a town that rallied around Rosie's. The diner's regulars doubled their tips, and a local blogger wrote a glowing piece about Rosie's resilience, calling her the heart of our community. Karen, it turned out, had a history complaints filed against half a dozen businesses in 3 counties, all dismissed as frivolous. The health department sent a formal letter clearing Rosie's, and Daniels made a point to stop by with it, sharing a bowl of pho with the staff. You got a family here, he told Ellie, who nodded, her eyes bright with gratitude. Looking back, Ellie realized the night hadn't just been about a bowl of noodles. It was about standing up to bullies, about the quiet strength of people like Rosie who built something from nothing and refused to let it be torn down. Karen had come looking for a fight, but she'd found a community that wouldn't break. As Ellie served a fresh bowl of pho to a smiling regular, she felt a spark of pride. The diner wasn't just a job, it was a place where people fought for each other, where truth won out, and where even the worst customers couldn't dim the warmth of home. Rosie caught her eye and winked, as if to say, we're still here, and they were stronger than ever.